What kind of person cuts a farm's power grid just to prove a point? Karen Mitchell did, and the sleepy Missouri town of Cloverfield would never forget it. The sun hung low over the rolling fields, casting golden streaks across the Harper family's soybean crops. It was harvest season, and every watt of electricity powered the machines that kept the farm alive. But that evening, as the sky bruised with storm clouds, a sharp crack echoed from the utility pole by the county road. Sparks flew, and the hum of the farm's equipment died. Karen stood there, bolt cutters in hand, her smug grin glowing in the fading light. She'd done it, snapped the main line to the Harper Farms transformer. Why? Because she could. Because she was right and they were wrong. The Harpers were stunned. Jacob Harper, a wiry man with calloused hands and a temper worn thin by years of hard work, stormed out of the barn when he heard the power cut. His wife, Lila, trailed behind, her face pale with worry. The farm was their lifeline, and without electricity, the irrigation systems, grain dryers, and packing machines were useless. Thousands of dollars in crops could rot in days. Jacob spotted Karen by the road, her oversized figure unmistakable in her bright red jacket, still clutching the bolt cutters like a trophy. "What the hell have you done?" he roared, his voice shaking with rage. Karen didn't flinch. "You people think you own this town," she spat, her voice dripping with venom. "Blocking my driveway with your trucks, acting like you're above the law. I showed you." Her words were sharp, but they hid a deeper truth, one that would unravel soon enough. Karen's feud with the Harpers wasn't new. It started months ago when Jacob's delivery trucks, hauling soybeans to market, parked briefly on the public road near her property. It was a minor inconvenience, but to Karen, it was a personal attack. She'd called the sheriff, filed complaints, and even showed up at town meetings, her voice booming with accusations of disrespect and entitlement. The Harpers tried to reason with her, offering to adjust their routes. But Karen wasn't interested in solutions. She wanted control. She wanted to win. Her complaints escalated, each one more petty than the last, until that fateful evening when she took matters into her own hands. The bolt cutters weren't just a tool, they were her statement. But there was more to Karen's rage than she let on. The Harpers didn't know it yet, but Karen had been quietly negotiating with a developer who wanted to buy their land for a strip mall. The Harpers refused to sell, their roots tied to the soil for generations. Karen, who owned a neighboring plot, saw their refusal as a roadblock to her own payday. The developer had promised her a hefty commission if the deal went through, and every truck that blocked her driveway was a reminder of her stalled plans. Cutting the power wasn't just spite, it was sabotage, a desperate move to pressure the Harpers into selling. She thought she'd covered her tracks, but the truth has a way of surfacing. Jacob's fists clenched as he faced Karen by the sparking utility pole. Lila grabbed his arm, her voice low but urgent. "Don't, Jake. She's not worth it." The air crackled with tension, not just from the severed lines but from years of small-town grudges now boiling over. Karen's smirk widened, as if daring him to lose control. "You'll regret this," Jacob said, his voice low and dangerous. Karen laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Regret? You're the ones who'll be sorry when you're bankrupt." She turned and waddled back to her car, leaving the Harpers staring at the wreckage of their livelihood. The cost of repairs would be thousands, and the lost harvest could cripple them. But Jacob wasn't one to back down, and he sensed there was more to Karen's act than petty revenge. The sheriff arrived within the hour, his cruiser's lights flashing against the darkening sky. Sheriff Daniels, a no-nonsense man with a graying mustache, surveyed the scene. "This is vandalism, plain and simple," he said, eyeing the cut wires. Karen, now back at her house, denied everything when questioned, claiming she was just out for a walk. But the bolt cutters in her garage, still warm from use, told a different story. Jacob's suspicion grew when he overheard a whispered phone call between Karen and an unknown man, mentioning the deal and pressure. He didn't have proof yet, but he knew Karen's outburst wasn't just about trucks. She had a motive and he'd find it. The next morning, the town buzzed with gossip. Cloverfield was small, and news of the power outage spread fast. The Harper's farm wasn't just a business, it was the heart of the community, supplying jobs and food to families across the county. Karen's act wasn't just an attack on the Harpers. It was a blow to everyone. Neighbors rallied, offering generators and labor to keep the farm running. But the damage was done. Crops were wilting, and the clock was ticking. Jacob spent the day on the phone with the utility company, learning the repairs would take days and cost upwards of $10,000. Lila, ever the optimist, tried to keep spirits up, but her eyes betrayed her fear. They couldn't afford this, not now. Karen, meanwhile, was unapologetic. She strutted through town, telling anyone who'd listen that the Harpers had it coming. Her arrogance was palpable, her face twisted in a permanent sneer as she dismissed the farm's struggles. But whispers were growing. A local mechanic, Tim, had seen Karen near the utility pole that night, bolt cutters glinting in the moonlight. He hadn't spoken up at first, scared of her wrath, but guilt gnawed at him. By noon, he went to Sheriff Daniels and spilled everything. The sheriff's jaw tightened. "That's enough for a warrant," he said, already planning the next move. Karen's web of lies was unraveling, and she didn't even know it. The Harpers weren't just fighting for their farm now, they were fighting for justice. Jacob dug into Karen's dealings, calling in favors from old friends in the county office. What he found was a bombshell. Karen had signed a contract with a developer named Vince Crowley, who'd been eyeing their land for months. The contract promised Karen a $50,000 commission if the Harpers sold. Jacob's blood boiled. This wasn't just a tantrum, it was a calculated move to ruin them. He shared the documents with Sheriff Daniels, who nodded grimly. "She's going down for this," he promised. The stage was set for a confrontation that would shake Cloverfield to its core. The tension in Cloverfield was thicker than the August humidity. By the second day, the Harpers' farm was limping along on borrowed generators. But the strain was visible in every furrowed brow. Jacob and Lila worked late into the night, coordinating with neighbors to save what crops they could. The community's support was a lifeline, but it wasn't enough. The utility company estimated a week for full repairs, and every hour without power meant more losses. Jacob's anger simmered, but he channeled it into action. He wasn't just saving his farm, was building a case against Karen Mitchell. Sheriff Daniels moved fast. Armed with Tim's testimony and the developer's contract, he secured a search warrant for Karen's property. The town watched as his cruiser pulled up to her sprawling ranch house, its gaudy lawn ornaments clashing with the rustic charm of Cloverfield. Karen answered the door, her face a mask of indignation. "This is harassment," she bellowed, her voice echoing down the quiet street. Daniels didn't blink. "Ma'am, we have evidence of vandalism. Step aside." The search was thorough. Bolt cutters with traces of copper wire, emails to Vince Crowley detailing her plan to persuade the Harpers, and a notebook with dollar signs scrawled next to sums that made Daniels whistle. Karen's scheme was laid bare, and she knew it. But there was a twist no one saw coming. During the search, Daniels found a hidden folder in Karen's desk, stuffed with old photos and letters. They weren't just personal, they were intimate. Addressed to Jacob's father, Daniel Harper, from 30 years ago. Karen and Daniel had been lovers, young and reckless, before he married Lila's mother. The letters revealed a bitter truth. Karen had been pregnant, but Daniel left her, choosing the farm and a new life. She'd never forgiven him, and when Jacob inherited the land, her resentment found a new target. The power grid wasn't just about money, it was personal. Karen's vendetta was rooted in a broken heart, and the revelation hit Jacob like a freight train. He sat in the farm's kitchen that night, the letters spread across the table. Lila read them in silence, her eyes welling up. "She's been carrying this hate for decades," she whispered. Jacob nodded, his jaw tight. "Doesn't excuse what she did, but it explains it." The discovery added a layer of pain to their fight, but it also steeled their resolve. Karen wasn't just a bully, she was a woman consumed by a grudge, willing to destroy a family to settle an old score. Jacob vowed to protect his father's legacy, no matter the cost. The confrontation came at the town hall, where Sheriff Daniels called an emergency meeting. The room was packed, farmers and shopkeepers alike crowding the wooden benches. Karen stood at the front, flanked by her lawyer, her face a mix of defiance and unease. Daniels presented the evidence. Tim's testimony, the bolt cutters, the developer's contract, and now the letters, which he kept private out of respect for the Harpers. "Karen Mitchell," he said, his voice steady, "you're under arrest for felony vandalism and conspiracy." The crowd gasped, then erupted in murmurs. Karen's composure cracked, her eyes darting for an escape that wasn't there. "You don't understand," she shouted, but no one was listening. Jacob stood up, his voice cutting through the chaos. "You tried to ruin us, Karen. Not just our farm, but our town. Why? Because you couldn't let go." His words were raw, laced with the pain of her betrayal. Karen's face twisted, and for a moment, she looked ready to confess everything, the developer, the letters, the years of bitterness. But her lawyer silenced her, whispering urgently. The sheriff cuffed her, leading her out as the crowd watched in stunned silence. The Harpers had won this round, but the victory felt hollow. Karen's motives ran deeper than greed, and that truth left a bitter aftertaste. The legal battle was just beginning. Karen's arrest made headlines across the county, with papers calling it the Cloverfield conspiracy. Her lawyer argued she was distraught, spinning the letters into a tale of emotional distress, but the evidence was ironclad. The prosecutor pushed for felony charges, citing the $15,000 in damages and the ripple effect on the town's economy. Jacob and Lila testified, their voices steady as they detailed the impact on their farm. The community rallied behind them, with neighbors offering sworn statements about Karen's threats over the years. Her defense crumbled under the weight of the truth. Karen's world began to collapse. Her developer, Vince Crowley, distanced himself, claiming he never authorized her actions. The contract was voided, and her dreams of a big payout vanished. Friends she'd once bullied into loyalty turned their backs, unwilling to be tied to her sinking ship. In Cloverfield, reputation was everything, and Karen's was in tatters. She sat in her cell, staring at the concrete walls, her arrogance replaced by a dawning realization. She'd overplayed her hand. The town she tried to dominate was closing ranks against her, and there was no way out. The trial was a spectacle Cloverfield wouldn't soon forget. The courthouse, a squat brick building on Main Street, was packed with locals eager to see justice served. Karen Mitchell sat at the defendant's table, her once haughty demeanor subdued, her eyes hollow. The prosecution laid out the case with precision. The bolt cutters, the emails, Tim's eyewitness account, and the damning contract with Vince Crowley. The damages to the Harper farm tallied $17,500, with another $10,000 in lost crops. The numbers hit like hammer blows, each one a reminder of Karen's reckless act. Her lawyer tried to pivot, painting her as a woman scorned, driven to desperation by old wounds. The letters to Jacob's father were mentioned, but the judge wasn't swayed. "Personal grudges don't justify felonies," he said, his voice firm. Jacob and Lila sat in the front row, their hands clasped tightly. Testifying had been grueling, forcing them to relive the outage and its aftermath. But they spoke with clarity, detailing the sleepless nights, the borrowed generators, and the community's scramble to save their harvest. Lila's voice broke when she described the fear of losing their family's legacy. Jacob's anger was quieter now, tempered by the support of neighbors who filled the courtroom. The jury, a mix of farmers and townsfolk, listened intently, their faces reflecting the shared pain of Cloverfield. Karen's actions hadn't just hurt the Harpers, they'd struck at the town's heart. The verdict came swiftly, guilty on charges of felony vandalism and conspiracy. Karen's face crumpled as the judge sentenced her to 3 years in prison, plus full restitution for the damages. The courtroom buzzed with whispers, but Jacob felt no triumph. "It's not about winning," he told Lila later. "It's about making things right." The financial hit was brutal, but the Harpers had saved most of their crop, thanks to the town's help. Karen's punishment was just, but it couldn't undo the fear and uncertainty she'd caused. Her fall was complete, a cautionary tale etched into Cloverfield's memory. As Karen was led away, the town began to heal. The Harpers rebuilt, their farm humming again with the return of power. Neighbors dropped by with casseroles and offers to help, their solidarity a quiet rebuke to Karen's selfishness. But the emotional twist lingered. Jacob couldn't shake the image of those letters, proof of a life his father had left behind. It wasn't guilt Daniel Harper had made his choice, but it added a layer of complexity to the victory. Karen's vendetta was born of pain, but she'd let it fester into destruction. The Harpers chose a different path, focusing on their future rather than her past. Months later, the farm was thriving, soybeans loaded onto trucks that no longer sparked feuds. Cloverfield rallied around the Harpers, hosting a community barbecue to celebrate their resilience. Jacob stood by the barn, watching kids play in the fields his family had tilled for generations. Lila raised a glass of lemonade, her smile warm. "We're stronger than she thought," she said. Jacob nodded, his eyes on the horizon. The power grid was fixed, the crops were saved, and the town was united. Karen's reckless act had tested them, but it also showed what they could withstand. Karen, meanwhile, faced her new reality in a cell 200 miles away. Her name became a byword in Cloverfield, a warning against letting bitterness win. The developer, Vince Crowley, moved on to other projects, his promises to Karen forgotten. The town rebuilt its trust, neighbor helping neighbor, proving that community could outlast spite. The Harpers didn't dwell on the past, they planted new seeds, literal and figurative, knowing their farm would endure. The story of Cloverfield stands spread beyond the county, inspiring others to face their own Karens. It wasn't just about a power grid or a farm. It was about standing up to those who'd tear others down to feel tall. The Harpers' fight showed that justice, though hard-won, was possible, and that a community bound by shared purpose could overcome even the most reckless acts. Their legacy wasn't just the land, it was the lesson that resilience and unity could light the way, even when the grid went dark.